I had been hiking the Appalachian Trail for weeks, enjoying the peace and quiet of the wilderness. The trail stretched out before me, a ribbon of dirt winding through dense forests, across rolling hills, and over rocky mountains. I was alone, but I liked it that way. The solitude gave me time to think and the chance to truly connect with nature. Every day I would hike from sunrise to sunset, stopping only to eat or rest my tired legs. At night, I would find a spot to set up my tent and fall asleep to the sounds of the forest. One evening, after a long day of hiking, I found a perfect spot to camp. It was a bit off the main trail in a small clearing surrounded by tall trees. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden light over everything. I set up my tent, cooked a simple dinner, and sat by a small fire watching the flames dance and flicker. The forest was alive with the sounds of birds, insects, and the rustling of leaves. I felt at peace, happy to be alone in such a beautiful place. As darkness fell, I crawled into my tent and settled into my sleeping bag, ready for a good night's sleep. The fire had died down and the forest around me was quiet. I closed my eyes and started to drift off. Then, sometime around midnight, I woke up with a start. I lay still, listening. At first I heard nothing but the sound of my own breathing. Then I heard it, footsteps crunching on the leaves outside my tent. My heart began to pound in my chest. I held my breath, straining to hear. The footsteps were slow and deliberate, moving closer to my tent. I could hear them circling around me, pausing now and then as if someone or something was listening to. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. I was miles from the nearest town, far from any other hikers who could be out here in the middle of the night. I reached for my flashlight and slowly unzipped my tent just enough to peek outside. I shone the light into the darkness, but I couldn't see anything. The footsteps stopped. I listened for what felt like an eternity, but all I heard was the distant hoe of an owl. I convinced myself it was just an animal, a deer or a raccoon maybe, and tried to calm down. I zipped the tent back up and laid down, but sleep wouldn't come. My mind was racing, imagining all sorts of dangers lurking in the dark. Then, just as I was beginning to relax, I heard something even more terrifying, a soft whisper, almost like a chant, coming from just outside my tent. The voice was low and mumbled, and I couldn't make out the words, but it sent a chill down my spine. I froze, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure it would give me away. Who was out there whispering in the middle of the night? I grabbed my flashlight again and unzipped the tent, this time more quickly. I shone the light in every direction, my hands shaking again. There was nothing, just the silent trees and the darkness pressing in around me, but the whispering continued, a constant eerie murmur that seemed to come from all around me. I felt a surge of panic. I was alone in the wilderness with no way to call for help, and someone was out there watching me. I knew I had to get out of there. I threw my things into my backpack, my hands trembling. I packed up my tent in record time, my ears straining for any sound. The whispering seemed to follow me, growing louder as I stumbled through the dark forest, trying to find the main trail. My flashlight beam bounced wildly, casting strange shadows on the trees. Every rustle, every snap of a twig made me jump. Finally, after what felt like hours, I found the main trail. I started walking quickly, then broke into a run. I didn't stop until the sun began to rise, casting a pale light over the forest. Only then did I feel safe enough to stop and catch my breath. I never found out who or what was out there that night, but the experience haunted me for the rest of my hike, a reminder that even in the most peaceful places there can be hidden dangers. In late September 2019, I was on a solo bike trip around the United States. I had loaded up my bicycle with camping gear and set out to explore the country. One evening, I found myself in rural Montana, far from the nearest town. It was getting late, and I needed a place to camp for the night. I found a quiet spot deep in the forest, far from any roads or houses. It seemed perfect for a peaceful night's sleep. As I set up my tent, I noticed how quiet it was. There were no sounds of traffic, no voices, not Even the usual chirping of crickets, it was completely silent. At first I thought it was a nice change from the noise of everyday life. I finished setting up camp, cooked a simple dinner, and settled into my tent. As darkness fell, lying in my sleeping bag, I couldn't help but notice the eerie silence. There was no wind, no rustling leaves, no sounds of animals moving through the forest. It felt unnatural. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that the quiet was a rare treat and I should enjoy it, but as I lay there, I started to feel uneasy. Suddenly, I heard footsteps outside my tent. They were slow and deliberate, crunching softly on the forest floor. My heart started to race. I listened carefully, trying to determine what kind of animal it might be, but the steps were too heavy to be a small creature. They were steady and purposeful, moving around my tent in a slow circle. I grabbed my flashlight and knife, my hands trembling. I unzipped the tent just a little and shone the light outside, sweeping it around in a wide arc. There was nothing there. The footsteps stopped as soon as the light hit the trees. I waited, holding my breath, but the forest remained empty and silent. I z'd the tent back up, my mind racing with possibilities. Maybe it was just my imagination, or perhaps a deer or another animal curious about my campsite. I tried to calm down and go back to sleep, but the footsteps started again, closer this time. They moved slowly around my tent, stopping every few steps as if whoever was out there was listening for something. I felt a cold sweat on my forehead. I knew I couldn't stay here. I quickly packed up my things, trying to make as little noise as possible. Every rustle of my sleeping bag, every clink of my cooking gear seemed unbearably loud in the silent forest. The footsteps continued, a constant reminder that I was not alone. I finally had everything packed and ready to go. I unzipped the tent and stepped outside, my flashlight in one hand and my knife in the other. I shone the light around one last time, but there was still nothing. The footsteps stopped as I moved, but the feeling of being watched remained. I got on my bike and pedaled away as fast as I could, the beam of my headlamp cutting through the darkness. I didn't look back, afraid of what I might see. I rode for what felt like hours, until I reached a small clearing where I could see the first light of dawn breaking through the trees. Only then did I feel safe enough to stop and catch my breath. The experience haunted me for the rest of my trip. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, and every time I camped in a remote area, I found myself listening for those slow, deliberate footsteps. The forest, which I had always found so peaceful, now felt like a place of hidden dangers. I never found out what or who was out there that night, but the memory of those footsteps and the eerie silence stayed with me, a reminder that even in the most tranquil places there can be unseen threats. It was a lesson in the unpredictability of nature and the importance of trusting your instincts. My friends and I had been hiking the West Coast Trail on Vancouver Island for a few days. It's a beautiful, rugged trail that runs along the coast with stunning views of the ocean and dense, lush forests. We were having a great time, enjoying the adventure and the challenge of the hike. We were also looking forward to the end of each day, when we could set up camp, relax, and share stories around the campfire. One evening, after a long day of hiking, we found a nice spot to camp. It was a small clearing close to the beach with a great view of the sunset. We set up our tents, gathered some firewood, and cooked our dinner. As the sun dipped below the horizon, we sat by the fire talking and laughing. The forest around us was alive with the sounds of birds and insects. Everything seemed perfect. As the night grew darker, we noticed that the usual sounds of the forest had started to fade away. It became eerily quiet. We all felt a strange sense of unease. Trying to shake off the feeling, we continued to chat and roast marshmallows. Suddenly, one of my friends pointed towards the tree. "Look over there," she whispered. We all turned to see what she was pointing at. There, just beyond the light of our campfire, were a pair of glowing eyes. They were close to the ground and didn't move. We all stared, trying to make out what kind of animal it was. Then slowly it stepped into the light. It was a cougar. It was large, with sleek, powerful muscles and a focused gaze. It didn't seem afraid of us at all. Instead, it just stood They're watching us. We all froze, unsure of what to do. I had heard stories about cougars stalking people, but I never thought I would encounter one. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could see the same fear in my friend's eyes. We tried to make ourselves look bigger, waving our arms and shouting, hoping to scare it away, but the cougar didn't budge. It just kept staring at us with those unblinking eyes. We decided to move our camp further down the trail, hoping to put some distance between us and the cougar. We quickly packed up our gear, keeping one eye on the cougar the whole time. As we started to move, the cougar began to follow us silently and effortlessly. It stayed just at the edge of our campfire's light, moving when we moved, stopping when we stopped. The forest was completely silent except for the sound of our own hurried footsteps and the occasional snap of a twig. We walked for what felt like hours, our nerves on edge. The cougar's eyes never left us, glowing in the dark like two tiny flames. We could hear its low growls, a constant reminder that it was still there, stalking us. None of us dared to stop or rest. We just kept moving, hoping to find a ranger station or some other sign of safety. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to break through the trees, we saw a small wooden sign pointing to a ranger station a few miles ahead. We quickened our pace, almost running now, desperate to reach safety. The cougar followed us all the way to the edge of the forest, then disappeared back into the trees. We didn't stop until we reached the ranger station. Exhausted and terrified, we told the ranger what had happened. He listened carefully and then told us we were lucky to be alive. Bears that are not afraid of humans can be very dangerous, he said. We probably surprised the cougar in its territory, and it was just following us to make sure we left. Hearing that didn't make us feel any better. The rest of our hike was tense. Every rustle in the bushes, every shadow in the trees made us jump. We finished the trail, but the memory of those glowing eyes and the feeling of being hunted stayed with us. It was a reminder that no matter how beautiful and peaceful nature can seem, it's also wild and unpredictable. 3 years ago, I decided to hike the Smoky Mountains with my dog. It was a beautiful day, and the sun was shining through the trees as we made our way along the trail. I loved the feeling of being surrounded by nature, far away from the hustle and bustle of everyday life. My dog, a large and friendly Labrador named Max, trotted happily by my side, sniffing at everything and wagging his tail. We had been hiking for about 3 hours. When we came to a fork in the trail, I checked my map and decided to take the left path, which would take us to a beautiful viewpoint. As we walked, I started to notice that the forest was getting quieter. The birds had stopped singing, and even the insects seemed to have fallen silent. It felt strange, but I shrugged it off and kept walking. A few minutes later, I spotted something up ahead. I stopped and squinted, trying to see what it was. As we got closer, I realized it was a mother bear and her 2 cubs. My heart skipped a beat. I knew that getting too close to a bear, especially a mother with cubs, could be dangerous. I slowly backed away, keeping my eyes on the bears. Max stood still, his ears perked up, but thankfully he didn't bark. Once we were a safe distance away, I decided to take the other path. At the fork, we retraced our steps and started down the right path. As we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I kept looking over my shoulder, but I didn't see anything. Max seemed to sense something too. He stayed close to me, his ears constantly twitching. About half a mile down the trail, I saw fresh prints in the dirt. They were large, much larger than Max's paws, and they had a distinctive shape. My stomach tightened as I realized they were cougar prints. Cougars are elusive and dangerous, and knowing one was nearby made me very uneasy. I decided it was time to turn back. We started walking back towards the car, picking up the pace. The forest was still eerily quiet, and every snap of a twig made me jump. As we walked, I started hearing faint whispers, like someone calling my name. I looked around, but there was no one. The whispers seemed to be coming from all directions, and they grew louder as we walked. My mind raced. I knew we were alone, but the whispers was so clear I felt the chill run down my spine. Max was also on edge. His tail was tucked between his legs, and he stayed close to my side. I tried to stay calm, telling Myself, it was just my imagination, but the whispers didn't stop. They were constant, and they made my skin crawl. As we got closer to the car, the whispers faded, but the feeling of being watched didn't go away. I kept looking around, expecting to see someone or something following us, but the trail remained empty. We finally reached the parking lot, and I let out a sigh of relief. I quickly loaded Max into the car and got unlocking the doors behind me. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching us. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a figure standing at the edge of the forest, but there was nothing. The drive home was tense, and I kept looking in the mirrors, paranoid that something was following us. When we finally got home, I felt a wave of relief. I let Max out of the car, and we both went inside, glad to be safe. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the whispers and the feeling of being watched. It was the most unsettling experience of my life, and it made me wary of hiking alone in the future. I haven't been back to the Smoky Mountains since that day. The beauty of the forest was overshadowed by the eerie silence, the fresh cougar prints, and the haunting whispers. It was a reminder that even in the most peaceful places there can be hidden dangers, and sometimes it's best to trust your instincts and turn back. I met this guy while I was still with my boyfriend, but despite being 10 years older than me, if I recall correctly, he wasn't someone I found attractive. We only had about 20 minutes conversation, and it was all very impersonal and polite exchanges. I only talked to him when it was absolutely necessary. It was just basic talk, nothing more. While my boyfriend and I started dating, and somehow that other guy knew about it. One night, when we were excited to go to the club together, we noticed that this guy was following us. It made me nervous, and I started freaking out. I ran to the bathroom with my friend for safety while our boyfriend turned around to talk to him. That guy, however, started acting really immature, like a 5-year-old boy. He even started crying and then ran away, leaving the nightclub. Then about a month later, I found a disturbing love letter in my mailbox. It was creepy because he had delivered it himself to my house, meaning that this guy had followed me to my door before and found out where I live. Fast forward 1 year, and I don't go to the place I met him anymore because he practically lives there. My friends told me he hangs out there every day, almost like he's waiting for me to show up. We moved after a while, and during that summer at the new place, I started noticing that guy at the mall. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, but then a shop owner I know well tells me that the guy's been following me and even hides when I turn around. That really worried me, so I shared the whole story with the shop owner. He was concerned too and promised to let other store owners know about the situation. He also assured me that he would call security the next time if he sees that creepy guy following me. I now have my own first professional level full-time stalker, and my boyfriend and I were clueless about what to do. My family was just as lost, and we were super worried. The police couldn't do much since this guy wasn't doing anything harmful at the time. It's been well over 2 years, and things are I don't want to work as a waitress, even though I really need the money, because I know he would find out where I work and then sit there all day and night just watching me. I try not to work anywhere near the place I first met this guy, especially around the city center. Going to the mall alone is a no-go for me now. I always bring my boyfriend along. There are specific supermarkets and cafes I steer clear of because I know he hangs out there hoping to see me. It's disturbing, and because I don't even know his last name, but he has a strange control over where I can go or not. I really wish I could leave the city, but it's not easy. Even if I'm meant to go somewhere else, he knows both my first and last name, and all I know about him is his first name and what he looks like. It's kind of scary because he could find me easily. The situation might get even riskier once I finish university. I'm aiming for a teaching position, and they put all your information on the internet, so it makes me worry about my safety and what he might do.